Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back, beautiful unicorns, to Get Your Shit Together podcast. And today you are tuning into another amazing episodes from the series of your journey of becoming from dreaming to doing. This is where real women share their real stories, the the messy, the magical, the middle part of becoming who they're meant to be. Because the truth and the reality is that your dream life does not start when everything is perfect. It starts when everything is messy, chaotic, and it really truly starts the moment that you say, I'm done playing small. When you have had enough and ready to do whatever it takes to once and for all go from dreaming to doing. And if you're ready to say that today, then grab your coffee, your water, your bubbly pop or tea, and let's dive in. Or maybe you want to light a candle. Let's dive in because today I do have an amazing guest. Her name is Sarah Marie Shoulak, and she is remote HR professional. She's a speaker, she's an artist, she's a nonprofit co-founder, an all-around Jill of all trades. She's also a mental health advocate as a survivor, a suicide survivor, and has survived multiple brushes with death herself, and is an author of a new memoir manifesto titled Death Dead Serious: How Death Made Me Laugh at Life. And you are going to absolutely love her story. And I did my best to not start asking any questions before we went live, so that way all of us get to hear the responses in the raw. And since this is Get Your Shit Together podcast, where we don't do all the surface level shit and we do say these, bad words that the society deems bad, but we do the whole raw and honest and truthful authenticity approach. And I wanted to start off with asking you the same questions I love to ask every woman. When did you realize the life that you were living wasn't actually yours and you begun to get your shit together?
That is such an incredible question. And I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to have this space to tell my story and to have other women share their stories and connect with other people and have those moments to go, oh, I'm not alone. Other people have been through this. And I have told this story before, so if you've listened to other podcasts I've been on, there is a very distinct moment that I recall, which sounds kind of funny when you think about my book and what you mentioned in my introduction, that I've had these multiple brushes with death. A lot of times people want life to be like the Hallmark experience where something big and dramatic happens and then that's the pivot point and like, oh, I fell asleep at the wheel, I got to get my shit together, or and it's like
Mm-hmm.
those feel like the more obvious moments where I should have turned my life around and I should have started making better choices or taking more control of my actions. But there was a moment, for better or worse, it did involve a man I was dating at the time, and it was a really bad, unhealthy relationship. And I don't say that to make him the villain of my story. I say that because inherently I was drawn to him because what I say is that our demons kind of bonded, and we brought out the worst in each
Yeah.
other. And it was that mentality of thinking, I'm a broken person, so only a broken person can love me, and I deserve less than the bare minimum because what do I really deserve, right? So it was that kind of
Yeah.
pattern of thinking that said, this is going to be it for me. And I feel like because of the patterns that I was exposed to, I kept on being really quick to jump into relationships and then be really quick to jump back out. That was always my dating pattern, is I would date people for like 6 months to a year and be like, well, that's what dating is. You try before you buy and you don't like it and you're like, why invest more time? But with this individual, I feel like it was paired with being older in my life, being getting towards my 30s, my late 20s. So I was dating him between 27 and 29. And I feel like I had this desire to double down, to say, I need to work harder to make this work because I can't fail again. I saw each bad, relationship that didn't work out as a failure on me, on who I was and my worth. And I felt like even though it was such a miserable relationship, and not even just like me sitting here to be like, I'm unhappy, like we were both miserable in this relationship. There was no redeeming qualities of it. But there were complicated factors. He had children, they were living, everybody was living with me. It was a bit of madness. And that's where I felt like I was just giving, giving, giving. I was giving to him, I was giving to the kids, I was giving to his ex-wife and her. It was like I was just giving. Anybody who said, here's a hurdle, I would jump twice as high as I needed to. And there was a moment where I literally drove out. It was in the middle of, I almost say the middle of a hurricane, but for people who don't live in Florida, I need you to understand that when hurricanes are coming, it's kind of like you watch them coming for a really long time. The spaghetti charts of where they think the hurricane is going to go. You have a lot of warning and a lot of lead up to it. And usually the hurricane, especially in Central Florida, is just a lot of high winds and rain. It's not really like anything very scary. So there was such turmoil in the house that I was living in, which I owned, my name on the mortgage, nobody else's. It was my house. I left because there was so much stress and drama, and whatever fight it was that day is probably the same fight we fought about many times. And I said, I'll take my chances with the storm. And I literally drove out in the wind and the rain. And I went around the corner. I didn't go far because I'm not an idiot. So I didn't go far. I just kind of went around the corner to have some space and catch my breath. And I sat like on the stoop of this church that was there. It was this big Baptist church. And I just sat there and sobbed. And I was like, what is going on with my life? And I don't know if I was waiting for someone to come out of the church and like miraculously like come to my aid and be like, oh, young lamb, come to the light, or whatever they were gonna save me from. Like that really was the pinnacle of the moment where I said, for better or worse, and this isn't a knock on faith, this is just the reality of self-advocacy, that it was at that moment that I said, no one is gonna come save me. And even for the people who are around me in my life who are looking in at this relationship and saying, you got to get out of here, this is not right for you, this is unhealthy, like we're watching you wither away. And I really was. I kind of refer to myself at that time as like the shell of a person. I just felt like an empty husk. Like I just felt like so, like if you could take a wet washcloth and like wring it out, and then you just like keep wringing it out and wringing it out, that like nothing else comes out, and it was just bone dry and they're still trying to wring it out. Like that's what I felt like in those years. And that was the moment where I said, you know what, I just got to start plucking the things away. I got to get them out of my house, I got to get him out of my life, I got to get a new job that it's like it became the moment that everything else stemmed from, that has been so bountiful ever since.
Yeah, that sounds like a journey of probably every woman. I will go and say every woman or most women who will be listening, where they find themselves lost in their own identity, where we find ourselves, whether nobody does it on purpose. We all do it because we are conditioned to put others first. No matter how we were brought up, we're all taught to put others first. And that's across the globe if we like really look at it. And until one point in our life where we wake up and we realize that I am here. I am important. And then you start to question of who am I? And I believe based on what I've listened and understood about human human brain is that usually happens when we're about 27 years old, when we start to awaken to this different reality and we start to recognize that we lost ourselves in the journey. And for some, like, for example, for me, that journey was motherhood. It was, I got married at 21, which is a very young age. At
Yeah.
22, and both my husband and I were actually the same month in the same year, and I'm 11 days older. So I have
Amazing.
the I'm older card. Listen to your elders, right? So got married at 21, lost our first pregnancy of twin girls at 22 years old, had our daughter at 23 years old, and then she came a month early, and then a couple of years later, 3.5 years later, actually, exactly, pretty much, we had our son, also came early, and all these things they add or take away from our identity,
Right.
right? And when we're not taught, like we go to school, but nobody teaches us how to be a mother. Nobody teaches how to be a father. And our parents, probably like your parents, probably like mine, were working all the time. So they weren't even there to show us how to be a mother or a father, aside from the way that they were able to show up on those few hours in the evenings, right? And that's what we learn. But then how do we fill in the gaps for the rest of it?
Right.
And and for a while there, I ended up being more like a stay-at-home mom, and that's where I feel like my world crumbled so much more. And it's never just one thing, it's so many
Well, you're like isolated then. You don't even have like let's go to work and have a routine. Like you're
yes.
just in this almost like a quarantine.
Yeah, and in the way it is exactly like quarantine in many ways. And then you can find yourself not wanting to go outside at all and socialize, because every time I would go out there, there would be someone there who would be mean. And I'm in a fragile state. Because after my son, I also ended up having postpartum depression, which turned into depression. And it's like going on meds and realizing I don't want that, because you lose yourself through that. And learning so much more about, even like, not even gonna go into like the politics and conspiracies, but we all know, right? All that stuff that we get to learn in our journeys that shakes our world and makes us question things and makes us question our reality and our beliefs and so much more. And as we're going through this this life, which is like a roller coaster ride, I don't know about you, but when I go on a roller coaster ride, I feel like every time I go down, I'm about to die. And every time I go up, I survived, right? Which means that there's that version of me that died when she was going down. And then there's the other version of me that gets to live, because this version of me must die.
Right.
And as we're going through this journey for you, as you were going through this journey that you continue to be going through, which is called life, right? There's versions of you that had to die in order for this version of you that finally got to live. So, what would you say was that version that had to die that stands out to you the most, that had to die in order for you to be here in the way that you are?
Well, I think it's a perfectly provocative question given the topic of my book, right? And the fact that when I decided to write the book, I had to kind of sort through all of the stories because I really see myself as a storyteller and I have so many stories to share with the world. And when I was going through the editing process and even just the beginning writing process of getting all the stories out there, looking at the through line and saying, wow, death has been such a continuous thread or theme in my life, whether that was deaths of people who happened before that shaped my family, that said, how do we or don't we talk about big things and work through big emotions, and was I able to look and have examples like you're saying where my parents modeling how to get through grief, were they doing it by packing it down and not talking about it, were they
Mm-hmm.
having memorials, were they lighting candles, what did grieving look like? And once again, where you kind of feel like there should be those obvious moments of pivoting in your life, like I was in a dramatic car accident, let's turn my life around. I feel like there are the obvious moments of near death experiences where there is actually a chapter in my book, which is the only one that's not about a real death, or real death in general, and it's the metaphorical death where it talks about sexual assault. And it says, the title of the chapter is This Is How Innocence Dies, or I think it's just called How Innocence Dies. And it talks about just a shift in perspective and what that looks like. But even more, maybe a little more tongue-in-cheek in more recent times after writing the book, we were chatting before we went live that I'm engaged. I'm going to have a wedding in February. And, despite maybe social pressures of feminist agendas and things, I am going to take his name because that's something that's just important for me and something that we've decided to do together. And so I kind of feel like there was a bit of that intention of writing the book under my full maiden name, which is Sarah Marie Shoulak, because in a very real way, at a certain point in February when I have that wedding, Sarah Marie Shoulak is going to die. And there is going to be this new
Yes.
version of me that comes out with the name of my married name and who I become there. And so I think that you're spot on when you say that life just continues to happen,
Mhm.
because just the same way that they use that tagline with therapy, that healing is not linear, there's no other side of healing. Then I think that's why so many people struggle with the process, because
Yes.
think about fitness or weight loss or having a health goal, right? It feels tangible. It feels like I weigh this much and I want to weigh this much, and I can see that I've done it. You can check the box and you say, I've done it, I've hit the goal, or I want to
Exactly.
build
Yeah.
this muscle, or I want to have this what do they call them, the PRs, the personal records for how much weight you can lift even. And it's a tangible thing that says I could only lift 5 pounds now, and now I can lift 25 pounds. I've hit my goal, I check the box. And healing just has nothing like that. There is no
Yeah.
tangible obvious way that says I used to XYZ and now I ABC. And I feel like what you have to start retraining yourself is thinking that it's not about a tangible thing, it's about your reactions, whether that's an outward reaction of how you engage with the world. I used to have road rage and now I don't. That's a way we can check a box
Mm.
and we can see mental health. Or a bigger one with people who've gone through trauma like myself is triggers. And that there's a point maybe when things are fresher that you respond in a really big way, or if you're already in an emotional state and then you hit a trigger and you have a really big response, that it's only through the work that we do with healing and with therapy and all these other outlets that maybe if you get triggered again, it's a smaller response, and we can look at that as checking the box. But it doesn't mean that you're never going to have those influences, the triggers, the things coming into your life. There's always going to be horrible drivers. There's always going to be those people in the grocery store that drive you nuts with their cart in the middle of the aisle, whatever. But it's
Right?
how we respond to it. Yeah, it's people just need to realize that traffic and grocery store driving with carts is like the exact same thing, and
Yeah. And
they
probably
don't
looks the
get that.
same on the road too.
Yeah.
No, that's a great example. And it's very really true that it's like it's all about how you choose now that you're awakened and you realize that you're feeling a certain way or understanding or translating the situation in a certain way, that you get to choose to respond in a
Right.
different way versus how you used to do things, which is reacting based on the default program
100%.
that we have, that we got. Like even you were talking about that process of how we learn how to grieve from our parents. Like, how did they grieve? We learn how to do those things. And I got to see how my mom dealt with grief when she had to bury her youngest brother. She was the oldest of seven,
Mm.
two girls, three boys, and then two girls. And then the youngest of the boys, he was murdered when he was in his early 20s. And the funeral was on my eighth birthday.
Wow.
So for me, death and birth, like so many things have happened in my life, and it's like earlier we were talking about the twins, right? Me being 22, my husband 22, losing twins, losing two, and we lost them at 22 weeks as well. The dog that we got to help me heal, it was exactly 22 on the dot, actually, which is 5 months, right? And he ended up passing away on my 30th birthday.
Wow.
The cat I was telling you earlier that I can pick up with my finger, she was my 30th birthday present that didn't
Mm.
choose me, that chose my daughter. And then on my 33rd birthday, I love animals. My husband knows, and my kids know as well. My husband's asking, "What do we get you for your birthday?" My birthday is actually going to be May 5th. And then my daughter, she goes, "Get her a pet, get her a puppy." And then he knows, like, I'm like, yes, please. But the dog that we got for me and my 30th birthday, because it took me 3 years to be okay to get a dog, she's here and she chooses me, right? And there is always kind of like that connection of where we are to where we were. But then once we become aware of that program of how we're showing up through the reactive way, because that tells us more about the program and not necessarily who we are, because who we are is who we're trying to be. And this is often what we do get confused, and this is why we get so upset at people where like somebody says, well, you're being a drama queen, because this is in my house often happens like that, right? Two girls and then my husband and having a son, so two boys and two girls. And in that moment, I can choose to be upset and continue to prove them right, right? But doesn't mean that this is who I am at my core. This is who I always am, right? This is who I'm being in this moment. This is who I'm capable of
Right.
being. And then I can choose, well, no, he called me out on who I am being in this moment, and I can continue or I can change. And the choice is mine. Sometimes I will continue, sometimes I won't, right? Depending on the situation. And then the road rage, that's the one that I'm still working on. I have my moments.
Oh, yeah. It's not linear, it's ongoing.
Right, exactly. Thank you for making me feel okay and normal with that. But it's 100% not a straight line. It's like it's like spaghetti. Similarly, like this is what they say a woman's brain is like. It's like spaghetti, and a man is like a waffle where everything is just compartmentalized.
Oh, good.
Whereas women are like, I don't know how many tabs you have open on your internet browser, but I do have quite a few, probably at least 12. And I
Right.
can't close them, and my kids know this. Okay, so now the next question that I'd love to ask is has to do with reality, right? Because when we finally begin to grasp our understanding of our current reality, there's parts of us that we also understand that we're uncovering the lies that we've been living. And for all of us, we all come to this point where we recognize and start to, in many ways, ask the same question, but in different ways. So for you, what was the biggest lie you were living that felt normal until it broke you?
I think that something that I always, I guess my quick answer that I've said on other podcasts that really came out of my sobriety because my sober journey of giving up alcohol kind of overlapped that relationship. So in the timeline and the chronology, I started dating this unhealthy person at the beginning of 2017, like really January, like start of 17. And it went downhill so quickly that by the end of 2017, by December, so January to December, December 13th, yes, for all those Swifties out there, it is Taylor Swift's birthday. But December 13th, that was the day that I gave up alcohol. And I don't know that I was really on a mission to become a sober person and say I'm never drinking again. I just knew that so much was being unhealthy and going in ways that I couldn't control that sobriety felt like a way to say, let me take this really big influence out of my life and see what else changes. And when I did that, a lot of sober people will tell you that it's not a magic wand that just waves over and suddenly poof, your life is like a Disney movie. It really did kind of get worse before it got better because what happens when you take away a giant coping mechanism like that is that you're left with who you really are. And what I jokingly say on other podcasts is I think I realized how much of an asshole I was when I took that away because all of the masking was gone and all of the kind of fakey niceness was gone. And I realized how I actually responded to challenges or things when I couldn't just like go have a drink and go decompress with, shots or something like that. So it made me realize how I actually needed to be and act and how I really was acting pretty immature in some ways and still do because it's not linear. So it's just like road rage. Like I can be immature and I can make poor decisions still. But I think where you say, what was the biggest thing that was easy to do until it broke me? I think it was almost an acknowledgement of being extroverted because my extroversion was really tied to people pleasing and a yearning for acceptance.
Mm.
And I think that I can trace it back like the first images that pop into my mind are like me being in middle school and trying so hard to be that class clown, that person who could make everyone laugh and that everybody would like me, to the point that I was doing physical humor and I would like fall down the stairs to get people to like, ah, ha, like that was so funny, Sarah. And I would do all of this stuff and it was actually physically harming me to a certain extent, but I thought, but they like me, but they're watching me and they're interested. And that hunger for attention that I mistook for affection and all of that stuff bundled up together was so hard to untangle, because when you have that extroverted personality and you're that class clown and you're the star of the show and people get to know you as that persona, well, then anything that you do that's not that, that's not being the center of attention and the star of the show and always trying to like make the joke and do the shtick, then people are like, well, you're not who I expected you to be. You're not acting the way that I'm used to you acting because I'm more reserved or I'm more. It's not that I'm not funny. I still have a sense of humor. I still like a good punchline, but I don't have that hunger to like make it happen or make it work or feel like my whole worth is tied up to if they laughed at my joke. It's
Mm-hmm.
more selective. It's more, I feel like I just did so many things that were performative,
Yeah.
and that I really, rather than calling myself an actual extrovert, I say that I'm just a gregarious introvert, because introversion and extroversion is not how we perform, it's how we recharge. And so I actually think that's a very common personality dynamic if you look in Hollywood or if you look at actors and actresses in general and say, where do they recharge? Because a lot of them are very they're kind of hermits, they're homebodies.
Yeah.
They do the work, they do the meta acting or whatever they call that, and then method acting, and then they go on stage and then they can be this big boisterous character because they know
Yeah.
how to perform. So I feel like that's much more authentic to me, and maybe part of it is just maturing and getting a little calmer and less sensational as I go, but it's also like it feels so much more aligned with how I want to act, and that I don't feel the need to just be on all the time.
It's exhausting to be on all the time,
Yeah. And
right?
half the time it's for what, for who? Like to make the person at the bank laugh? Like, no offense, you said you were a bank lady, but it's like, is
Yeah.
it really for that? Like, do I really care about that person liking me or not? I'm gonna leave here and never see them again. But
Yeah.
I was so obsessed with like I have to make every single person around me at all times like me all the time, or
Yeah.
I'm failing.
You know what I call that? And the ladies that have been around me long enough, they know I refer to this as the good girl syndrome. Like
Mm.
that's what it is. It's the good girl programming where I've even watched my daughter. She would be so like embarrassed if I share some of the stories, but she knows I like, listen, you're my content, okay? I birthed you. I can at least talk a little bit about you. And my son, the same thing, obviously. But she was the program that she got, obviously from us and from the school, was to always people please, to make
Mhm.
everyone's day a little brighter than when you found them. Now, you tell this to a child, they will take it literally. And what
Right.
she was doing is some moments were like some moments it was great and I was so proud of her, and some moments were like so embarrassing that I honestly have never even imagined that it would ever happen. I did not know what to do even with myself or what to do with my hands and my face. It's like one of those like I wanted to become a hermit crab right there in the moment. um and the one that I'll share, there's a few, but I'll just share one, is we were at Walmart, and this was obviously a few years ago. She's 16 now. And this is when she was, I think, about 7 or 8 years old. And I'm at the cashier, and there's a lady behind me doing her own thing. She's not helping anyone, but she's in a little stool and everything. And my daughter, she turns around and she goes, I love midgets. And this lady is a midget. And I'm like, oh my God, Mila, you're the sweetest. I But you point out what you love about a person that really stands out,
Hmm.
right? Because you want to make them feel good and happy, and that's where it's coming from. But to me as a mother, and I can only assume, as we were talking about assumptions earlier, of what that lady was thinking, of what my cashier was thinking, and the lady that was next in line was thinking, and if
Right.
anybody else that was around, right? And we all want to run away from shame and embarrassment.
Mm.
And that was the moment. But that was her being a good girl and putting
Mm.
others first and people pleasing and making sure that everybody feels valued in some
Right.
way. And we want that. So the program itself is a great and amazing program. But she, as an individual, gets to now mold it into something entirely different that makes it hers.
Right.
And unfortunately, like nobody really is fully in control of what program we give our kids
Right.
because there's so much influence out there. But what's going to happen, like it happened in your life, in my life, and everybody else that I'm sure you have worked with and will be working with, and same for me, and then our kids, our families that we know, they come to a place in their life where with whatever they're experiencing, they get to a point where it feels like enough is enough moment.
Right.
So for you, um where was that your enough moment where you knew you would either need to change or this is it, this is how the rest of your life is going to be and you stay stuck there?
Well, in terms of feeling like I was going to stay stuck, that is that relationship that I was in. Because,
Mhm.
not to be too dramatic, but this is a podcast where people get really real, and it really felt like the narrative, the internal monologue, the thing that my brain was telling me, and almost like I almost think of it like the Inside Out characters that are like living in my mind and like controlling
Yes,
it up
I
there,
love
and like
those.
the sirens are blaring, and they're
Yeah,
just like warning, warning, and it kept saying you're not going to get out of this alive, and I
yeah,
think a lot of I think about that in not a self-harm kind of way, but in terms of I was not going to make it out alive, in terms of I either wasn't going to be the same person on the other side of that
yeah,
relationship, or, when we talk about a version of you dying or things like that, like I think that's what my body was trying to tell me, is that
hmm,
we were getting to the point that almost was like of no return. That if I continued down this path, if I
yeah,
continued to double down, if I continued to say, I just need to work harder to save this relationship, and the influences were so strong. I had people involved in the situation, which again, I'm not trying to make anyone villains or name names to have them come after me, but I had people who were like, you guys just need to go to couples therapy. And this was a relationship that I already saw as being kind of negative within the first year that I said, let me quit drinking to see if that influences it. And I still remember the minute that I told that ex that I was going to quit drinking, his response was, well, that's a bummer because I really like drinking. And it's unreal how much the support was
wow,
not there from that person.
yeah,
But I said, this is for me. This is for me to feel like I have some semblance of control in my life, because for the rest of everything that's going on, I feel like I have no control. So sobriety, it was able to be my rock and the
hmm,
thing that I could cling to say, this is something I do for me. It's not to show other people how strong I can be, which a lot of times people may know from my background if you've watched other podcasts or read about me and stuff. I trained in a lot of fighting sports. So from about 15 years old, I was in karate and then jujitsu, and then I tried mixed martial arts like cage fighting and Muay Thai boxing. And I really did want to be a cage fighter. I really just,
mm.
I was joking in the keynote I gave on Monday. I was like, I really wanted to kill people a lot, which hopefully that doesn't mess up our live stream. But I was a very aggressive person with a lot of pent up frustration and
Yeah,
anger, or maybe just female rage, like whatever. I wanted to get it out in these ways. And I feel like that was doing it for the wrong reasons. That wasn't doing these actions to get strong and be strong and take care of my body. I did all those things performatively, in this
yeah,
performative manner, to say, look at how strong I am. I beat up men, blah. It was like I wasn't even doing it right. I wasn't even actually strengthening my core. And now I have tons of, now I wouldn't just call them all health issues, but I herniated a disc in that process. I have other chronic injuries from it. I have arthritis in my hips already, and I'm only 36, and I've got my kind of riddled with arthritis. I might need a new hip soon. I got all these things. And my doctors always say it's because I did these fighting sports. And
yeah,
so when I look at those actions and say I was doing it to have the presence of a strong person. You know, I wanted it so that I could
Mhm.
flex my muscles. I wanted it so I could do these things. That was doing it for the wrong reasons. But sobriety was doing it for me. That there was no other, nobody was even really respecting me for being sober at that time. It was like a very lonely path in the first few years. And then to have the influences of people who were, in my ear, very close to me, going, "You guys just need therapy. We did therapy and it worked for us." And it's like, but you had kids together, and there was reasons why maybe therapy was more right for you. But
Mhm.
when I think back to the other relationships that I referenced, where I'd maybe get in and date them for 6 months to a year and then realize this doesn't feel right and move on, that was probably the better way to date and get to know people in that relationship. And when I felt so stuck, that was the point where it almost felt like a riptide. It almost felt like I was
Mhm.
suddenly sucked under and drowning so quickly that I couldn't even realize what happened. Because to me, I kept thinking that I was doing the good girl method. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was
Yeah.
doubling down on my commitment. I was showing up. I was going to parenting classes. I was doing all that. Like, I was doing everything I thought that I could right. And it still felt wrong. And I was still losing myself. And I think that those are the times when we ignore what we really know is right, and we just continue to say, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I just challenge everybody
Mhm.
who's listening and watching to say, supposed to for who? Because it's
Right.
probably the supposed to do is for somebody else, or like the general world. And if the general world isn't giving you anything else, then I don't think you're supposed to do anything for them.
Yeah, and they're not paying your bills either. So
That's
who
what
are
I'm
you really
saying.
doing it
Right.
for?
And then if you lose yourself, or you die inside, metaphorically or literally, heaven forbid, like, then really, was that better than you standing up for yourself and stepping away even if some people don't talk to you again after it? I don't think so.
Yeah. And like you said, nobody gets out of life alive. Like,
Yeah.
and that is a truth. And this is something that many of us are scared of. As I mentioned, I've had a few experiences with life and death. And the one that really cracked me open in the end was when my dog passed away on my 30th
Mm.
birthday. I watched him go. Like I had my hand on his heart and on my heart, and it's just watching him go and having two big men near me. And my husband is 6'5", and then his youngest brother was there, and he's 6'3", somewhere around there. They're both big guys, and I'm 5'1". On a good day, I'm 5'1.5", or maybe 5'2" if I can stretch. Right, I like to say, as if I have a choice, right? Um, and it really gets you to see life in different ways. And when it comes to relationships, as you said, it's like, yeah, you don't want to beat up on these people, but it's not beating up on the people, it's just the experience itself. And there's another amazing quote that it goes something like this, that we don't remember what people say, but we remember how they made us feel.
Oh, that's Maya Angelou. She's great.
Right? And I love that. And I remind my daughter of that as well, because even as my daughter is growing up, I see that the boys that she's dated and the things that she would put up with, even at such a young age, which is absolutely not okay. And then also question, where is this boy getting this kind of information, right?
Right.
And how to treat women, and it most likely is not in the household, or maybe it is. And then educating my daughter that what's okay and what's not okay, and having those boundaries in place is important. This is where you gotta be the bring in the rebel, and put the good girl to the side and set that clear boundary. And what you were talking about, where you wanted to change your life, and someone who's supposed to be your partner, who's supposed to be as a partner, I'm in. The response was, well, that sucks. Too bad for you, because I'm continuing this and I'm not changing my life because it is perfect. And the reality is like, no, it's not. Otherwise, you'd be continually doing that. But I feel like it's big part of that is the lifestyle,
Right.
because you chose it to change your lifestyle, and some people are simply not ready. And whether we're dating them or they're friends or their family, they got to be left behind. Otherwise, they're going to be like that anchor that brings us down, holds us where we are. You're trying to swim away, like, a ship, a boat, it's not going to go anywhere if it's anchored. And
Right.
that's why we don't want to have those anchors. Um, and so for you, as there's a lot of things that we're also talking about grief, right? As you're losing
Mm.
things on this journey of life, whether it's the previous version of you or physical things that you lose on this journey. I'd love to know what it was that you lost that you did not expect to grieve.
Hmm. Well, let's see. There's a lot of things that come to mind, some of which I share publicly, some that I do not. So I'm being conscious that we're on Facebook Live.
Right?
So I think, a lot of times I think grief is such a prickly and taboo subject. And I think that's specifically why I chose to write a book about death, is because
Mm,
whether it's an actual death, you hear somebody, I lost my dog, I lost my parent, I lost a child. When you hear that big admission of loss from someone, there is such a natural reaction to go, ooh, like, kind of cringe and back away and go, I don't know how to deal with that. And I think I
yeah.
also need to be a little honest here and say that
Yes,
just
please.
because I've been exposed to all of this grief and all of this dying and all of these almost dying moments, that doesn't mean that I'm a grief counselor. It doesn't even mean that I'm a good friend to my friends who are grieving. Sometimes I get
Yeah,
uncomfortable because of the closeness to it, that I don't know how to respond. I don't know how to be there. So I actually end up
I can
giving more
relate. Yeah.
space. And then they can sometimes see that as abandonment, that I'm not being there for them. But partially it's like I'm waiting for them to tag me in and say, Sarah, this is what I need from you. And then I'll be there 1,000 times stronger.
Hmm.
But I don't want to overwhelm. I don't want to trigger them. I don't want to make them uncomfortable. So I kind of give space until they call me in. And I think that the obvious examples of actual loss and grief are hard enough, and then you layer that over with, well, something traumatic happened, right?
Hmm.
Maybe there was a sexual assault, or maybe I'm so depressed I might take my own life. You hear things like that that are traumatic and horrible, and we have that same reaction of, ooh, I don't know how to handle this, I'm going to step away. When
Hmm.
those are some of the moments that people need us to be the closest for them, and even just sit and listen to them. So I think reflecting on these in my own life and saying, what did I not expect to grieve? I think that the obvious ones we expect to grieve are the real obvious deaths. So the
Yes.
times that I lost people, whether it was friends or family, but then there's that chapter that I referenced earlier of how innocence dies, and when something was taken from me, and it can be in a really abrupt way, and it doesn't have to be a sexual assault. It could be you lose your house, you lose your job, you
Yeah.
lose you become disabled, and suddenly your ableism or your ability is taken from you very quickly. And those are things that I think are easier to get jaded from, because you don't even have that normal process of, well, this is death and we grieve death. It becomes, almost like an imposter syndrome of, well, how will my friends take it if I grieve losing my job? Meanwhile, somebody's been unemployed for 6 months. They're not going to give me any sympathy because I
Right.
lost my big cushy job and I can go get another one. So I think that there is just an equal amount of taboo and like ookiness to it, where
Yeah, it's
people
almost a
push that
comparison,
distance.
comparing it as well.
Exactly. Oh, 100%. And so you feel like I shouldn't tell my friends this. I shouldn't bring this up
Yes,
because
because it's not as
because other
bad.
people. Yeah, and if it's not cancer, then you should just still be grateful. Which you
Yeah.
can, but you still need to have the space for the grief and loss of what you expected to have in a life you expected to have.
That's very true. It's like there's normal things that we do grieve the loss, but in some ways we're still comparing it. I
Right.
compared the loss of the twins and minimized myself because this is what good girls do. We
Mm-hmm.
literally minimize ourselves and bring ourselves down to make the other
To
person
not make other
feel,
people uncomfortable. Oh yeah.
yeah, to make them feel comfortable so that way we are uncomfortable by
Mm-hmm.
doing that, which means that somebody's still going to be uncomfortable. And in the end, it's like, I'll be uncomfortable. And I would minimize it. And I remember even going to work. I had no choice but to go to work. We had the funeral on Tuesday, got my puppy on Wednesday, and on Thursday, I had to go back to work because they had a business to run. This was at a bank. Um, and the assistant manager who had to pass that message to me really struggled to even pass that message to me. And I knew everyone there. So it was really tough. But at the same time, I don't see everything that I've gone through as bad or good. I
Right.
see it as this is what it was, but there's still lots of good that comes out of it. So in many ways, I do see it as good, right? But temporarily, when we're there, that's all that we see, and we struggle with that. And then you mentioned because you're talking about life and death, right? And experiencing that. I would love to hear what experiences that you feel comfortable sharing that you have experienced that brought you to, between life and death. And also love to hear what do you know and understand about life after death?
Right. And in the book, spoilers, but there are
Yes, please.
four kind of like, I guess, three or four experiences that I really just shouldn't have walked away from. And I think I put it in my, application for this, and you put it in the caption of this thing, is that
Mhm.
what's really powerful is that I really shouldn't be here to tell these stories at all, because
Right.
there were all of those instances where if even the slightest thing would have changed, I could have been a paraplegic or quadriplegic, or I could have been, had incredible brain damage, or I could have not walked away. I could have just died altogether. One of the most prominent, the one that I say about falling asleep at the wheel, it wasn't just falling asleep at the wheel and getting into a car accident. I had my cruise control set at 55 miles per hour when I fell asleep at the wheel. So just imagine the
Yeah.
life, the your life not being in your own hands and not being able to control it, because I was literally asleep at the wheel, going barreling through life at 55 miles per hour. And when I woke up, the cruise control was still on, but my car, I was in the right lane because obviously I was driving in the United States. So I was driving in the right lane, and I drifted while I was asleep with the 55 miles per hour, and I ended up in the ditch on the other side of the road. So again, grateful that nobody else was oncoming traffic that I could have run into because it was so late at night. And when I ended up in that ditch, the trees were hitting the car and made my airbag go off, and it woke me up, and I realized I was in a ditch, and I pulled the car back up. But I write in the book, and I say when I tell this story, that if I was driving and I fell asleep more in a more jerky manner and I turned the car more aggressively, I would have gone straight into the tree
Yeah.
line at 55 miles per hour. So when I woke up from an airbag and I pulled the car up, that's when I get goosebumps still to this day, and I say there was really actually no reason that I should have walked away from that. Like, of all of the things that happened, that it was just like, oh, a surgery that could have gone wrong, or like a ATV accident, sure. But that one I almost feel like has to be divine intervention, and it has to be that moment. And again, a lot of people would look at that and go, well, that's the moment that you turned your life around. And it's not. It's I was still, in the throes of people pleasing and alcohol abuse and doing all this stuff, and performing for other people. But it is the moment that I was most grateful for actually walking away. And in the book, there's a pin that was I was driving my mom's car, and she had a little pin of a guardian angel. And I actually took it with me, and I said, this is mine now, because I think it just saved my life. And it was just such a good reminder of how precious life is. And that all of those stories combined is kind of the reason why I wrote the book, because I acknowledge that I'm writing a memoir very early in my life. I started writing it at 35. It came out when I turned 36. And I've had a lot of life in just 36 years. But that doesn't mean that I'm guaranteed another 36 and that I'll write this, in my 70s. It's to say that life is so fleeting, and one of those could have taken me out, and then there'd be no book, and there'd be no storytelling, and nobody would know all these things. And so if that can be my gift to the world, that I say, let me be honest, let me be transparent, let me share these stories with you, so that other people can read them and feel less shame about the things that they've gone through, and say, well, I should have turned my life around then, or I should have made that decision, or I should have left that person sooner, or I should have
Yeah.
never moved to that place. Like, I said it in my speech on Monday, and I had never said it this way before, and I just loved how it sounded. But shame is really the killer of inspiration. And to be
Yeah.
an artist who feels shame and who has guilt and who says, well, I can't be this person, it's more than just imposter syndrome. It is literally like arms that are holding you back from the life and the world that you want to live in. And the minute that you cut those ties of guilt and shame and grief is the tricky one because that's always going to be with
Yeah.
us. But if you let shame and guilt go, like who is making you feel shame? Who is making you feel guilt? It's usually like this weird other or a specific person. And then think about it. Why do you care what this weird general other feels or this one person? And if this one person is really that good in your life, then they shouldn't be making you feel shame and guilt. So
Yeah.
really, I feel like that's just what I want everybody to unlock and move past is the shame and
Yeah.
guilt and say you are absolutely worthy and able to find a joyful and happy life on the other side of whatever happened to you, because it's all inside of us,
Hmm.
and just like stress, I feel like keeping these things inside of you of it's almost like a stomach ulcer, right? Like all this like acid that's
Yeah.
bubbling around, and that's what shame and guilt feel like to me. And the minute that we stop, maybe it's like we should all have the amount of guilt and shame of like white men because it's like zero. And so if we just unlock that, I feel like everything else in our lives just opens up and becomes a field we can just run through openly and not a minefield.
Hmm. I love what you said about shame. It really, I feel like what you're talking about is that shame essentially is it's a feeling and emotion that we feel
Mm-hmm.
on the inside, and it's very visceral. But anything that we feel comes from our program, and the program is our way of understanding something. And it made me think of this the speech that I heard. I can't remember who her name that said it. But she has like a Latin accent, and she says that the reason why you get upset when people call you things and call you names is because you have a meaning to it.
Mm.
But if I was calling you names and calling you different things in a different language, you wouldn't understand what it means because you don't have a meaning to it. So it's really the
Mm.
meaning that you give it. So when we feel that shame, it's really what we're feeling, and what is triggering is the program that we have somehow created through our life that we weren't fully conscious for, that is now dictating this is what happens in the external world. It's like a math problem. Plus this equals shame,
Mm.
right? And usually we are part of that equation, and it doesn't feel good, right? We don't like to
Right.
feel shame, but leaning into it and understanding it is where we really truly begin to find ourselves. And you're definitely right. Somebody was watching out for you. It made me think of all those videos where we've seen like ghosts in a little video where a person is riding a bike, and it's almost like a glitch in the matrix. That's what it looks like. Some shadow appears, and then this person on the bike is over here, and then the car was almost about to hit them. And it's like, and there's of course there's tons of other ones, just the one example. That's where we feel like that. It's like you could have gone straight
Oh
into the
yeah.
trees, and that would have been it. Or on many different levels, it would have been it. But then also, like, that's not your rock bottom.
Right.
And I do see this across the board with every human being that I've spoken to, including myself, because I lived through it. There's not just one rock bottom, it's one and another, another. It's where we can no longer tolerate the rock bottom. When we no longer want to go on that roller coaster ride, I'll tell you, it's the moment that I decided that I'm not going on the scary rides, I'm going on the kid rides,
Yeah.
right? And this is where you choose life, where it's like you really choose life in the way that you want to choose it. Some choose it to go skydiving, others, because we choose the things that we're scared of and to tackle them, still going on a roller coaster ride, just how scared do you want it to be? And others don't want to be doing that. And And then as we're going through life, we're continuously getting our shit together. Like you said, it's
Right.
not a linear thing. It literally is like a bowl of spaghetti. And for you, what does getting your shit together actually look like right now in real life?
Well, with everything that you were just saying, the quote that I've heard that comes to mind about change and starting to choose, which type of rides am I going to go on, or am I going to set boundaries with this family member, those types of things that make you feel
Mm,
uncomfortable. The quote that comes to mind is, and I won't get it exact, but it's essentially, when the discomfort of staying becomes more than the discomfort of change. And
yeah.
that's when we're actually able to say, this is what really is what I want to do, and I'm going to chase this. And I think the blessing that I have to take from this book writing experience with the Soul Speak Press, to shout them out for your listeners, but going through this process of writing the book, it gets really, it how do I put this? It was easier for the earlier stories, because for the earlier stories I've probably told them a lot. I know how I tell the stories. I know what I've kind of taken from the stories. But as you start to get into more modern times, because again, I'm a young person writing a memoir, right? So it's not like
Hmm.
I'm an 80-year-old and I'm writing about my 20s and what my 20-year-old decade was like. But there has to be a point, first of all, there has to be a point where you like cut off the stories, where you're like, this is where I'm going to end and stop telling stories. Because with life, life keeps giving me more examples that could have gone into the book, and I had to be like, okay, we're stopping at this point, right? And at the same time, when you're writing a memoir about healing, and healing is not linear, there's not like the last chapter is going to be like, so that's it, guys, follow my 12-step process and you can be healed too. Like, it doesn't, it's so inauthentic to think like it's going to end like that. And
Yeah,
so
true.
I write the book about healing as somebody who is still healing, and somebody who stands in front of people to speak and say, I am on the same mission as you. Just because I'm 8 years sober doesn't mean I'm 8 times happier than you, right? It doesn't work like that. It doesn't equate in those ways when you're talking
Yeah.
about the math problems of life. And so for people to kind of take inspiration from it, that's why I want to focus on the shame. That's why I want to focus on how relatable the stories are, and that people read the book and they go, oh, I had a cousin who was murdered. So I understand when there's murder in the family and what that means for the family to have that kind of shame associated with the story. And do we actually tell people, or do we say it was a heart attack, or do like, how much do
Yeah.
we mask? How much do we hide? And there are places where we can be more vulnerable and honest versus not. So I think that going through that process, what was fascinating in particular was that when I'd be writing the book, and I'm obviously like, we put the hats on, where we're like, I'm the
Yeah.
mom right now, or I'm the writer right now, or I'm the HR lady, and you put the hats on. And so when I was writing, it was really obvious what I was working on. But then I would go into other parts of my life, and something would happen, or I would have a trigger or an influence, and I would immediately think of the book. And I would say, is
Mm.
there a way I could laugh at this or find levity in this? Or I could acknowledge that I don't need to have the rose tinted glasses. It's not about toxic positivity. But because I'm carrying this heavy weight and this big heavy thing just happened to me, I'm going to do something lighter. Or I'm not going to watch the news because that's going to add more heavy to the already heavy. Like, it's because I am acknowledging this and I see it for what it is, and I'm not hiding from it and I'm not hiding it, that I can give myself what I need and balance it. And it's about balance. It's not about hiding and masking and ignoring and stuffing down emotions. It's saying, I'm going to hold enough space for it that I know what else I can hold in my other hand.
Yeah. So that way you're not denying yourself.
Mm.
Because what makes us us, what makes us human is all these feelings and emotions. And we can't get rid of them. And I'm glad that you said that there is nothing in the end of your book that says this is it, this is how you do it, this is even like how you get your shit together, right?
No,
There's
ma'am.
no magic wand that does that, because all of us are living a life that is different from one another. Like even down the street, thinking
Yeah.
about, like, for a moment, I like to do this exercise once in a while. Obviously, in my neighborhood, I can only come up with so many different examples. But in different neighborhoods, like if I lived in this neighborhood, or if you're doing this for the first time, this neighborhood that you're living in, imagine how everybody's living their life that is in your neighborhood. And when you start imagining, maybe you're like me, where everyone is living an entirely different life. And there's some mafia boss somewhere in the street, right? So depending on the things that you like to watch and enjoy, you're gonna bring them into your real life. And I'm like wondering which one is the mafia boss? Probably the one that smokes a cigar
I have one across
every
the street too.
single
Yeah,
day
he's always in the cigar.
with his Swiss Mountain Dog
Right.
sitting there, and I'm like, that's probably the mafia guy. Like, and it's fun to do that, but at the same time, I recognize that who are we really comparing our life to? Who,
Right.
like all these shoulds that you were saying earlier, we should be doing this, should be doing that, should be living life like this or like that. Where are they coming from? Because if we're looking and thinking about how everybody else is living their life, they're probably not doing it in the same way. There's one family that we know exactly when they're going to be going with their RV and when they're gone and when they're coming back because that RV, like we know when the season starts for them because they bring it
Mm-hmm.
out. And we know that they're going RVing where? We can only imagine. Or we can go knock on the door and question, but
Probably not.
right? I mean, to each their own. Some might be brave enough to do that and it's their thing. For me, I am actually an introvert. And I used to be an extrovert and I changed along my journey, having gone through depression, having gone through that loss of a soul. And you were talking about like people pleasing when we're
Right.
literally losing ourselves. And I remember there was many mentors that we all come across, and mentors just someone that comes to us and stays with us, something they say or do. And this was actually Jim Carrey that he said and shared this, I think it was Instagram that I saw, and he was talking about depression, his understanding of it, and that depression is really our soul awakening. This is how I would translating it in my language, because I speak in my language and not his language, right?
Yeah.
How I understand it. His ways like that this is our soul awakening, and we're realizing that we're so tired of playing all of these acting roles for everyone and not even knowing what our own role is of who we are. And that's what we're meant to be doing here. And that's why we feel depressed, because our soul, our body is deeply resting, right? Deep rest. So
Mm-hmm.
we're deeply resting because we're so exhausted physically, mentally, spiritually, emotional, in any way that we can think of, that we're just exhausted. We can no longer be all of these actresses, all of these
Right.
different ways how we're showing up for everyone, and we're forced to go within and do something with it. Unfortunately, some people do make a choice that is irreversible. Luckily, I didn't make that choice, but there were moments where I felt like I was really close, and usually they were always in the car
Right. Oh yeah.
because it's the easiest way. It's like, and in my mind, having two little kids, my son at that point was 2 years old. It's like, if I go down this ditch, I go down there, like, will it end, right?
Right.
And in the end, it's like, well, no. You playing around and seeing different ways. And in the end, there was something else that Tony Robbins said, where he was doing a speech in universities and he asked everyone after he's done a speech or make a list of something, the worst thing that happens, the most embarrassing, shameful thing that happens. And this is where, like, right, human emotion, knowing that shame and guilt is the hardest one of them all, and list of what you're going to be doing. And he was shocked to see that more than half, the first thing was to end it all.
Hmm.
And his response was, what's the point of making the rest of the list if this is the first thing that you put on there? Why don't you try everything else? And then, if all fails, all these other 100 things that you have on here, if they fail, because they won't, and we all know this, then you make that irreversible choice. And for me, that was one of, like, there's always these big light bulbs and there was so many others, but this is
Yeah.
the one that just kind of came through, especially when you were talking about um what I teach it in the way of its pain and gain matrix, when
Mm.
the pain of staying the same is stronger than the pain of change, which means
Right.
that we're no longer scared of changing because it's not as painful, but staying the same is much more painful. And that's when we finally change and we say, literally, and this is what I always say, when we've had enough, and there was family members and people I knew that others like, oh, I want them to change, I want them to quit, and they haven't had enough. They haven't reached enough rock bottoms to come out on the other side and say, I've had enough, enough is enough, that the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And that is when we change. And I know there's many women listening right now and they want to know, they probably have so many questions, but there are women who are stuck. They're stuck in the dreaming and not doing. They're stuck in the doubting and not knowing. They're stuck in that overthinking, over analyzing phases. What would you say to her that that might finally help her to move and do something about it that she is not ready to hear?
Well, I'm really good at the tough love, so here we go.
Yes.
There is a wonderful quote, which once I find out who it came from, I will give them credit, but I essentially heard this way of thinking that said that if you worry about something in the future, then you really worry about it twice because you're worrying about it in the present. And then, if it were to come up, like if you think about you're going on a trip and you're going to be worried about the trip and you have to worry about what you're packing and you have to worry about the weather is going to be and you have to
Yep.
worry that the
Yep.
reservations are right and you have to worry in the future. But if you worry about it right now, then you're worrying double because you're taking the present away from yourself with all the stress and worry. And then when the trip actually comes up, you're going to go through it all over again. And I think, particularly zoning in on women and how we've had those programmings of the good girl complex and how we have to be really prepared, right? We're all good little Girl Scouts with our packs all packed of everything we could possibly need to be ready. I'm super guilty of this when I travel. And the root of it is that we can only carry so much.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, you might think that your brain is helping you, that you are being proactive by trying to think about every possible scenario that could come up, right? But really, it's making
Mm.
you worry about it double. And when you think about maybe using the example of setting a boundary with a family member, that can feel almost impossible. Or leaving somebody that you're married to, that can feel almost impossible, especially if your finances are tied up with them, if everything that you value and anything that could help you, you don't have a vehicle because it's in their name, like everything can feel impossible to leave. But what you're not doing in all of those ideas is you're not looking at the infinite possibilities of how things can get better.
Yeah.
And you're not looking at, well, if I have the support and what is on the other side, where is the joy on the other side of this? Because what your brain is doing is it's in survival mode. It's thinking about all of the worst things that could happen so that you could be that good little Girl Scout to be prepared. But what happens is you don't actually die when you set boundaries with a family member. If you were to leave
Hmm.
that person, that could be the best thing that could happen to you, and you could find your actual soulmate on the other side of this. But if you
Yeah.
stay in an unhealthy place, it really could get worse for you. And so I know that it's much easier said than done, and especially when it comes to things like domestic violence, like it's obviously, hindsight being 2020 and from the outside looking in is so much easier. But I just want to maybe catch some of the overthinking and help give them that mental clarity that says, find the support for what situation that you're in, whether it was sexual assault or domestic violence or bad situation, or even just an unhealthy job. Like the way that an unhealthy job can influence you and kind of seep into and change you as a person, and when you're giving so much and giving all the time, then you don't have anything left for your family or for yourself when you come home. So it doesn't even have to be trauma by the big T trauma that we think of for you to decide this isn't right for me and I really do have to change it. Because all of those fears of, well, if I leave my job, then this person's going to hate me, or if I leave this job, this person's never going to talk to me again, or if I leave this job, blah 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 blah. Like it's probably not as bad as you think it's going to be on the other side.
Yeah. It's very true because really the what I will add to what you said is They've done some studies around what happens, the things that we worry about. They say that 80% of things that we worry about, that we stress and waste so much energy on, never happen,
Mm-hmm.
ever. And
But we
the
still
other
get the impact of the
20,
stress. Yeah.
right? And then the other 20, if it happens in the best case scenario. Like the outcome of it, just even thinking of the worst thing that ever happened to any one of us, the ripple effect was something amazing came out of it. And that is the best case scenario. So which
Mm-hmm.
means that 80% of what we're worried about, waste our precious energy worrying about. We could be worrying about other things, worrying about things in a positive way of like, oh, what will I do with all the time that I have? Ooh, that's a real problem for some people. Like, especially if you're starting your business and you're just in the beginning stages and you don't know what to do, how to do it, you're not gonna know how to do what to do with all that time. Or now you're a
Mm-hmm.
stay-at-home mom, or you just had a baby and oh, you have all this time. I'm gonna do all of these activities, and you have planned, and you used to get so excited, and like I'm gonna have all this time to do this and this and that, and then based on my experience, a year goes by after you have a kid, and you go back to work, like, oh, I haven't done shit. But we continue to reinvent ourselves, and thank you for sharing that. I would say that without knowing ourselves, how can we know where we're going to be going next? And through this journey, we get to know ourselves more through the bad experiences than the good ones. The bad ones are the ones that really shape us and make us who we are, or they break us. And they can break us temporarily or permanently. And it comes down to a choice to do something with it or not to do anything with it. We can become the victim to our circumstances, or we can become the victor of our circumstances. And then they're not really our circumstance anymore. It's like, it's either own or be owned.
Yeah.
And for you, the last question I wanted to ask you as we were wrapping up here, what part of yourself are you finally allowing yourself to exist without trying to fix or hide or prove it to anyone anymore?
Well, I think it also came out of this book writing experience when I said, when something would happen in my life and I would remember what I'm writing for other people in the book, and then I would kind of call myself out on that and say, is there a different way to look at it? And so, also throughout this process of the book writing, I think it's become more and more obvious how you have to hold space for big emotions. And what I mean by that is because it was such a pattern of behavior for me to stifle and not feel big emotions, because the minute that a woman feels big emotions, you're hysterical or you're whatever, fill in the blank word, that you feel like you need to be this
Yeah.
even keel, and that ends up being the goal of, well, I just need to be this level, this, the duck on the water with the feet underneath going like this.
Mhm.
And what I realized was, I am so okay crying. I am so okay feeling these, and it could be, I do cry at like the drop of a hat. So I'll be, on Instagram, and I'll be scrolling and I'll see these different videos and I'll watch one and I'll just sob, and I won't hide it. I won't, brush it away. I'll just let myself cry because I want to feel that, and I'm grateful that I feel that, because like you were saying, sometimes you're either on a medication and it kind of makes you that zombie where you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an unrealistic expectation that we never feel big emotions, and that the goal is somehow to be this robot that never expresses big emotions. And yeah, there's a time and a place where to get angry, where to feel sad, where to this. And usually I'm in the comfort of my own home when I'm crying, like it's not on the bus or not in the DMV or something weird like that where I'm making it weird for other people. But to remember in your life in general that big emotions are okay to feel, because I will tell you from personal experience, the thing that I'm most confident in or sure of is that they're going to come out either way. They're either going to come out
Yes.
in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. So the more that you can transmute the feelings that you have and the emotions of the things that you've gone through, and maybe that helps bring closure to a big T trauma thing that you went through, that you turned it into a poem or art or music or something. Maybe that doesn't make it go away and it doesn't take away the flashbacks or the triggers, but it helps you get closure of the big feelings about it, so that maybe when the trigger happens, the feelings are smaller, the reaction is smaller, because it's just impossible to think I'm going to stifle this all down, I'm going to pack it down into my life, and then I'm okay, because that's what I'm presenting, is that I just don't have these big emotions. They will come out whether you like it or not. So you better have a good path for them, or you're gonna blow up at the grocery store.
Yeah, well, nobody blows up at the grocery store because of one thing that happened. It's an accumulation of things.
Bingo. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Exactly. And then we just either explode or implode. Both are equally damaging to the body. Because what happens is we're expressing what I refer to as catabolic energy, and it's like a cannibal. It eats away at us and it destroys us from inside out. And this is where we also have, like, I love to dissect things.
Yeah.
And words are, I believe, were also made in the words are magic spells. And when we understand words, we really start to understand what they actually mean. So understanding what disease is just dis-ease, right? It's dis-ease in the body. And that's why if we pay attention when we go to a doctor, no matter what problem we're telling them we're having, they are going to mention stress.
Right.
I kid
Oh,
you
it's
not.
all stress.
Anything, any problem you are having, it is stress related. And they're going to give you steroids, they're going to give you antibiotics, they're going to be giving different
Or
things
antidepressants. That's what they
for
kept trying to give
stress,
me.
right? And antidepressants because it's easier.
Hmm.
It's here's a magic pill, it's going to fix it all for you. But it didn't fix anything for me. It actually made things worse. And I don't even know what damage it caused on the inside of my body because I don't have a scan to see what my body looks like on the inside. And I watch all of these ER type of shows, doctors. I'm like, oh shit, I'd love to have a scan so I can see my brain. I can have a relation to my brain because when we see our brain and we see it outside of ourselves, all of a sudden it's real.
Right.
And the same thing with our bodies. We will respect it and we will treat it as such and treat it like this is a meat suit, right? This is like a car that we chose to drive. And then the driver of the car is the conscious and unconscious
I just
one.
have a bunch of stickers on my bumper over here.
See, and I would love to have bumper stickers all over my vehicle. But I only have a few here, and
I love it.
I think I have eight in total or seven. I don't know. I gotta count them. I haven't. It's been a while, but I
Yeah.
would love it. It just never seem
It's
to
an
get
expensive
around to it.
hobby. Yeah.
And that fact that it's expensive, I'm like, 2 grand for a half a sleeve, or
A vacation.
right, or vacation, or pay the bills. Which one is it gonna
Hmm.
be, right? And then the kids are growing up, they're gonna be going to school, so it's just juggling and choosing what to juggle and what not to juggle. So I just want to say thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your story and sharing yourself and your light authentically today. And everybody listening, please make sure you go and you follow her, check her out, and check out her book. Perhaps it is something that you're going to be reading shortly to help you get over that hump. So your camel's back does not get as broken, but it still needs to get broken. We all need to feel that brokenness in order for us to really wipe our tears, get up or sit up and say, okay, I guess I gotta do it on my own. And we don't do anything on our own, even though it is a lonely journey, we're doing it on our own, but there are other people that can help you out. And mentors come in different ways and shapes and forms. Even if you, let's say, don't choose to work with Sarah, you can at least get her book and she can be your mentor through that book. Right? All right. So, if you also love this episode, please make sure that you're sharing with a friend or with a sister, so they can come and check it out as well and hang out with us inside Get Your Shit Together podcast, where conversations like this can help you become the best version of yourself and give you some tools, some know-hows that you're going to be walking away with at the end that will help you to get to that next level of evolution for yourself. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast, because not all of them are actually going to be live. Many of them are pre-recorded or unable to go live, as Sarah already heard. I struggled the last few weeks, and now I
We got through
finally
it.
figured out Zoom made it easier, and yet they made it complicated. Maybe I should read those updated emails that they sent once in a while. So we'll see you on the other side. Until then, keep showing up, keep becoming that best version of yourself. And remember, you are not too old, you're not too short, because I like to say that. You're not behind, you are not alone, and you're not too late. You are right on time, and you're exactly where you're meant to be. If it feels chaotic, it's there for a reason, and this will pass. It's like a storm, it will pass, and you will see everything in the rearview mirror. You will see everything when you look back. That's how we're meant to be understanding life. We're living it in the moment, but also we're living it in our past. And you get to choose how you also look at it as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Sarah, as well. Until next time, have an amazing the rest of your day.